October 8th, 2025, 4:17 a.m. In a command center beneath the FBI's Chicago field office, Special Agent Rebecca Torres stared at a wall covered in surveillance photos, wiretap transcripts, and interconnected diagrams that looked like a spider's web. After 14 months of investigation, she finally had what she needed. Not just evidence, not just probable cause, but a complete map of how two of the world's most dangerous cartels had turned Chicago into their American headquarters. On her left, the Sinaloa Cartel's distribution network. 43 cells operating across the city, moving fentanyl through legitimate businesses, car washes, restaurants, construction companies, gross revenue, $340 million per year through Chicago alone. On her right, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, 37 cells, separate from Sinaloa, but operating in parallel, sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating. Another $240 million in annual drug trafficking flowing through the same city.
It led law enforcement to multiple locations throughout the city of Chicago, I think indicating, one, that there was drug trafficking that's going on in multiple locations. And this is a really good example of what law enforcement does. It follows the evidence where it leads them.
One spot was at 61st and Tallman in the Chicago Lawn neighborhood, where authorities say they discovered a drug deal for 2 kilograms of cocaine and another for heroin. In all, 17 people are now charged in federal court in this drug trafficking probe.
This is how we are going to improve public safety in Chicago. It is one neighborhood at a time, and it's everyone working together. We are working to make Chicago a safer city. Chicago Police Department cannot do it alone.
More than a dozen people are charged and a lot of drugs seized from the streets of Chicago.
Combined, they had transformed Chicago into America's largest inland drug distribution hub. $580 million worth of fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin moving through the city every year. Enough to supply 17 states. Enough to kill millions. But here's what made this different from every other cartel investigation in FBI history. 2 months earlier, President Trump had designated both the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG as foreign terrorist organizations. That single stroke of a pen changed everything.
Under the Trump administration, we're finally treating the cartels as the core national security threat that they really are. The cartels are waging war on America, and just as I promised in the campaign, we're waging war on them like they've never seen before. All you have to do is turn on your television and you'll see what's happening to them. Past administrations have tried to mitigate this threat, and our objective is to eliminate it. We're not mitigating, we're eliminating, we're getting them out. The bad ones we're putting in prison. We hate to do that because that means we're stuck with them for 50 years or more. In recent weeks, our Homeland Security Task Force has seized more than 70 tons of deadly narcotics, along with more than 1,000 illegal guns. That's just recently. This is already the most successful anti-cartel and anti-gang operation in American history, and it's just getting started. We have incredible people. A lot of them are in this room with us today, and it's an honor to have them. But we're going to not stop until the threat has been fully and completely eradicated.
These weren't just drug traffickers anymore. Under federal law, they were terrorists. And everyone who worked with them, from street dealers to money launderers to corrupt officials, could now be charged with material support of terrorism. The penalty? Life in prison, no parole, no deals. Torres had 763 arrest warrants sitting on her desk. Federal indictments charging everyone from cartel lieutenants to low-level distributors with narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, firearms violations, and money laundering. The largest coordinated takedown in Chicago's history, larger than any mob bust. This would be the single biggest law enforcement action the city had ever seen. But there was a problem. The two cartels didn't know about each other's full operations. If the FBI hit Sinaloa first, CJNG would vanish. Hit CJNG first, and Sinaloa would scatter. The only way this worked was if they struck both organizations simultaneously, hitting every cell, every safe house, every stash location at exactly the same moment. 14 months of investigation, 763 targets, 96 hours to execute. If they succeeded, they would cripple 2 terrorist organizations in a single operation. Can the FBI and ICE dismantle a $580 million drug empire without starting a war in America's 3rd largest city? Hit like, comment, and subscribe before we reveal how Operation Steel Trap became the most ambitious urban raid in federal law enforcement history. It started in July 2024 with a traffic stop in Gary, Indiana. A pickup truck with Illinois plates speeding on I-90. When Indiana State Police pulled it over, the driver was nervous. Too nervous. A K-9 unit alerted on the vehicle. Inside the wheel wells, 47 kilograms of fentanyl. Street value, $2.3 million. The driver, a 23-year-old from Pilsen, offered to cooperate. What he told DEA agents changed everything. He wasn't working for a local gang. He was working directly for Sinaloa, and they weren't just moving drugs through Chicago. They were manufacturing them here, processing them here, distributing them across the entire Midwest from warehouses hidden in plain sight. DEA passed the case to FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres, who ran the Chicago field office's transnational organized crime unit. She'd been tracking Sinaloa's Chicago operations for 3 years, but this was the break she needed. The driver knew locations, names, phone numbers. He knew about a processing facility in Cicero where cartel chemists converted cocaine base into crack, a warehouse in Pilsen where Mexican nationals assembled fentanyl pills. For 11 months, FBI surveillance teams tracked cartel members across Chicago. They planted GPS trackers on vehicles. They intercepted phone calls. On May 12, 2025, Torres presented her plan to FBI Director Christopher Wray in Washington. The operation would require coordination between FBI, DEA, ICE, ATF, Chicago Police, and Illinois State Police. They would need 400 federal agents plus 200 local officers. They would execute 763 arrest warrants across 127 locations in a 96-hour window. And they would seize every ounce of drugs, every weapon, and every dollar they could find. On May 27th, President Trump was briefed on Operation Steel Trap during his daily intelligence meeting. His response was immediate and unequivocal. Operation Steel Trap was officially authorized. The countdown had begun. FBI analysts divided Chicago into 8 sectors. Each sector would be hit by a dedicated strike force. FBI agents, DEA, ICE, ATF, and Chicago Police tactical units working together. Every team was assigned specific targets with detailed intelligence packets. The cartel's leadership structure in Chicago included 14 key figures, 7 from Sinaloa, 7 from CJNG. Each one had a dedicated FBI surveillance team tracking their every move. By early October, everything was in place. Agents were staged, warrants were prepared, tactical teams had rehearsed their assignments. Torres sent the activation order all units were to be in position by 4 a.m. on October 8th. The operation would begin at dawn. In safe houses across Chicago, cartel members went to sleep that night with no idea that FBI surveillance teams were parked outside, waiting for the signal. In processing facilities, fentanyl pills rolled off assembly lines while undercover agents watched through cameras installed weeks earlier. In stash houses, millions of dollars in cash sat in duffel bags, ready to be seized. October 8, 2025, 4:47 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet. Chicago was still dark, and in 8 staging areas around the city, federal agents received the same message simultaneously. Operation Steel Trap is go all teams execute. The largest coordinated federal law enforcement operation in Chicago's history had just begun. 4:49 a.m. Across Chicago, armored vehicles moved through quiet streets, FBI SWAT teams, DEA tactical units, ICE enforcement squads, all converging on pre-assigned targets simultaneously. In Pilsen, a 3-story warehouse that supposedly stored restaurant equipment was surrounded by 20 federal agents. Thermal imaging showed 17 people inside. The main door was reinforced steel. The windows were barred. This wasn't a warehouse, it was a fortress. At 4:53 a.m., breaching charges blew the door off its hinges. FBI agents flooded inside, weapons raised, night vision turning the darkness green. They found exactly what intelligence predicted: 4 industrial pill presses stamping out fentanyl pills that looked identical to legitimate prescription painkillers. 17 workers, all Mexican nationals, all terrified, stood with hands raised. On tables, 340,000 pills ready for distribution. In storage, enough fentanyl powder to produce 2 million more 2 blocks away. Another team hit a laundromat in Little Village. The front was legitimate: washing machines, dryers, customers' clothes hanging on racks. But in the back room, ICE agents found $4.7 million in cash being counted and bundled for transfer to Mexico. 8 cartel money managers were arrested on the spot, along with ledgers detailing 6 years of transactions. In Cicero, DEA agents raided a processing facility hidden inside a trucking company. Inside, 120 kilograms of cocaine base being converted into crack cocaine by 4 chemists wearing lab coats and respirators. The facility had ventilation systems, chemical storage, and safety equipment that would have impressed a legitimate pharmaceutical company. It was shut down in 4 minutes. By 6 a.m., 18 locations had been hit, 127 arrests. The largest terrorism prosecution in Chicago history had begun. Cartel response. In Mexico, both Sinaloa and CJNG leadership were furious. They had lost their primary American distribution hub and $580 million in assets. Internal communications intercepted by NSA showed cartel leaders blaming each other for security failures. Some predicted internal violence as factions fought for control. The cartels were wounded, weakened. Impact on Chicago. The immediate effect was dramatic. Fentanyl availability in Chicago dropped by an estimated 73% within 2 weeks. Street prices doubled as remaining dealers struggled to find suppliers. Overdose deaths decreased month over month for the first time in 3 years. The city's murder rate, often driven by drug-related violence, showed a measurable decline. But law enforcement officials warned against declaring victory. "We've won a battle, not the war," Torres told reporters. "These organizations will try to rebuild. Our job now is to make sure they can't." National implications. Operation Steel Trap became a blueprint for operations in other cities. Within 3 months, similar coordinated strikes were executed in Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Houston, each targeting cartel networks using the FTO designation to enable terrorism charges. The aggressive approach sparked debate in Congress about law enforcement powers, immigration enforcement, and drug policy. But for the families of overdose victims, for the communities that had watched their neighborhoods deteriorate under cartel influence, Operation Steel Trap represented something simple: accountability. For once, the people who flooded American streets with poison would face real consequences. When American law enforcement is empowered, when they're given the tools they need, and when they're allowed to do their jobs without interference, they are unstoppable. 763 terrorists arrested in 4 days, over $500 million in drugs removed from our streets, not a single agent injured. That's American excellence. He paused, looking directly at the agents assembled before him. The cartels thought they could operate with impunity in our cities. They were wrong. Operation Steel Trap has shown them that America will fight back, and we will win. As the sun set over Chicago that evening, the city felt different, cleaner, safer, like something had shifted. The neighborhoods that had suffered under cartel influence for years were beginning to heal. The streets where dealers had operated openly were quiet. 763 people who had chosen to support terrorist organizations were now in federal custody, facing sentences that would keep them imprisoned for decades. The $580 million drug empire that had poisoned the Midwest was dismantled, and a message had been sent that would echo through every cartel from Mexico to Colombia. American cities are not your territory. American streets are not your market. And when you bring your violence to our shores, you will face the full weight of American justice. Operation Steel Trap wasn't just a law enforcement operation, it was a declaration. The war on terror now included the war on cartels, and America would fight both with the same relentless determination. If you believe these stories of courage and justice must be told, then like this video, subscribe to our channel Busted, and share this with someone who needs to understand that law enforcement never stops fighting for our communities. Because the battle against the cartels continues, and so does our commitment to winning it.